Whenever I go on holiday, I'm always reminded of the time I was featured as Well-Traveled Man of the World of the Year in the 1987 edition of Thomas Fitzgerald Monthly. It's a magazine which serves mostly as a traveler's guide, catering to the refined borscht enthusiast the world over, although its major distribution is in Greenland and southern Tasmania. The full name of the publication is actually Thomas Fitzgerald and Sons Compendium of World Travelers, Grilled Cheese Connoisseurs, and Baboon Fanciers, but that is rather a mouthful, and baboons aren't quite the in thing they once were, so most people just use the short version. But for the magazine to fill their requisite word count, they asked me to retell my most exciting globe-trotting adventure. But to tell you the truth, I'm not really much of a storyteller, so the only anecdote I could think of was the history of my rather unusual name. You see, my parents were of two very distinct lines of ancestry. My father's family raised giraffes deep within the island of Crete, which is where I picked it up, and my mother's lineage ran through a noble caste of Venezuelan tribespeople. Well, I needn't tell you that the naming traditions of a Cretan giraffe farmer and a Venezuelan aborigine are quite different, and this caused a significant amount of tension. My parents eventually decided to seek the help of the local magistrate of the Congolese city-state in which they were living, a man named Stanley Mbutu, a magnificent problem solver, world-renowned for his career as a Tibetan monk, a terrifically skilled cribbage shark, and due to a clerical error, Miss Universe 2002. Mbutu meditated on this question for 3 weeks straight, and during that time, as is tradition, insisted that he eat only food that was colored powder blue, he drink only from a pond deemed sacred due to the natural caramel flavoring of its waters, and during his sleep be read to from the Big Book of Babylonian Baby Names by his Samoan aide Steve. In fact, not too long ago I had the pleasure of visiting the place of my eventual birth and was able to taste for myself the sacred caramel waters of legend, which, it saddens me to say, have apparently lost a lot of their flavor since Mbutu retired as magistrate at the ripe old age of 97 to pursue a career in percussive interpretive speed metal. Once he had emerged from his seclusion, Mbutu told my parents to go on a pilgrimage to New Zealand. Not New Zealand, mind you, but New Zealand, the newly rebuilt Zealand theme park in Wyoming, just off the I-80, one in the chain of 26 alphabet theme parks across the country. Thankfully for my parents, the recent Mongol invasion of Kenya had ended with a victory for the KAF. My dad used his contacts there to get my parents aboard an Ethiopian freighter bound for New York, stopping only in Uzbekistan to deliver humanitarian aid in the form of some 86 metric tons of faux whaleskin fedoras, the Kenyan spoils of war from the Mongols. And upon arriving in New York, my parents made their way to Wyoming via sled dog, whereupon they endeavored to look up a man by the name of Jeffrey Hutz, as Mbutu had instructed them. However, finding Mr. Hutz in New Zealand proved to be quite tricky, as the excitable Vietnamese gentleman was constantly on the run from the law. Not that he'd ever done anything wrong, nor was the law actually chasing him, he simply had an irrational phobia of octagonal hats. Ironically, this phobia would lead him to flee to Britain later, where the police headgear is less polygonal, and sadly he would be arrested by an officer who had an irrational fear of Vietnamese gentlemen. When my parents finally found Mr. Hutz hiding in an empty barrel of sauerkraut, he was all too happy to introduce them to a close friend of his, the Sultan of Brunei, who was in town on business that day. He took quite a liking to both my parents, and the rest is history. And in fact, the Sultan and my family have remained close friends for many years since then, and I often help him out on little projects he's working on from time to time. And that's why I'm going on holiday.